Okay, I'm going to show today a simple test that you can do to determine where to set your machine and IQ to get the stitch length you require. That's something that's a bit puzzling when you first get IQ, especially if you've only quilted in regulated mode, because we only use IQ in unregulated mode. So I'm going to set up first the little test that I'm going to sew out, and then we'll have a look at the rest. So here we are at the main menu. I'm going to go Design, Sew, Quilt, Start New. I'm just going to answer yes to these pop-up questions. And I'm going to add a block pattern. And I'm going to enter rectangle manually. Width 10 inches, height 10 inches, that's exactly what I want. So I'll go Enter, Enter, Continue. And then this is showing where my needle is, and I need to move my machine up to where that would be on my quilt, which will be about here. That will be good. Okay, and my pitch has disappeared, so I'm just going to pan it down to bring it back into view. Okay, zoom off. Okay, finished. So now I'm going to add just a straight line to that block. So I've got my straight lines in not in my geometric catalogue, but in my catalogue called Building Blocks. I'm going L for line, here's the line, continue, and it's in that block. And I'm going to move that straight line up to the top. Okay. Now that straight line's 10 inches, which is very useful for this this experiment. So I'm going to hit finished. I want more 10-inch lines, so I'm going to hit repeat pattern. Select the pattern to repeat. Continue. And I'm going to go Y repeats. And I'm going to make them, let's see, 1 inch apart. Okay, so Y repeats again. Plus, 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 plus. I'm not really counting how many I'm doing. That's enough for this experiment. So we'll go finished. Okay. So now, at this point, I'm going to sew each one of those lines, but I'm going to change the settings. And for the first, let's see how many I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So for the first 5, I will change the setting on my machine, but keep the settings on my IQ tablet the same. Okay, so we'll go finished, sew quilt. I'm only going to select this first one to stitch, and I see the end is here and the start is here, and I'm going to swap that, so they start over here and end over there. Okay, that's good, just the first one. Continue. Sew quilt. Now IQ's moving to the start, taking the one stitch. I will bring up the bobbin thread, so we're ready to go. Alright, so here on the screen it says my IQ speed is 1.1 inch per second and my details is 0.9 inches per second. Because this is a straight line, those could actually be the same, but we'll keep them different just for now. Okay, I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to change that setting. I'm going to leave it as it is. Now I'm going to go down here to my machine controls. Now on my IntelliStitch, this side of the dial is for regulated stitching, stitches per inch. This side of the dial is for manual control. So there really aren't any numbers. There's 1 through 10 and then there's no numbers. So the more I get my little dial to max, the faster the machine goes. Down here at 1, it does 1 stitch per second. Up here at 10, it does 10 stitches per second, and then it just gets faster and faster and faster. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start out. Oh, and the other thing I need to explain with my machine is that right here between these two notches is where I get that dreaded vibration on my machine. So I try and stay away from that, from setting my dial here. That's peculiar to my machine. Other machines may not get any vibration at all at any speed, but it's good to know if your machine does that or not, and you'll see that through using it. So okay, to go back up a bit, okay, I've got my IQ set speed 1.1 inches per second, details 0.9 inches per second, and I'm going to set my IQ, my IS, my speed control on my machine, to 10. Alright? That means this is controlling, the IQ is controlling the machine just the same way my hands would if I was using this manually. All it's doing is moving the machine. My controls on my machine are controlling how fast the needle goes up and down. So let's set this going and we'll see what our stitches look like. Okay, it did the full 10 inches, which is kind of nice, and let's cut the threads. I don't know if you noticed, but I also have my machine set so that it does little stitches at the start and at the end. Those are kind of locking stitches. But can you zoom in on this? Can you see those stitches? Mm-hmm. You can see how big they are. Now, since this is 10 inches, I could put a ruler against here and actually count how many stitches there are per inch here. It's quite big. So I know in order to get smaller stitches, I'm going to speed up the control on my machine. I'm not touching the IQ setting, I'm just going to speed up my machine. So we'll go Sew Quilt again, up here on the screen. This time I'm going to, I've stitched that line, so I'm going to touch undo. I'm now going to stitch this line. Again, I need to swap the start end points so that it starts on the left and ends on the right. I'm going to go continue. I'm going to go Sew Quilt. The machine is moving to the next line. I just lost my thread end, so I will bring it up. Okay. So in order to get shorter stitches, I need to make my needle move faster. So I'm going to change my dial more towards maximum, and I'm going to go right there just before where my machine starts to vibrate, and we'll see what this looks like. Okay, continue, start. Okay, now I'm going to cut those threads, come back this way. I don't know if you can see how much shorter those stitches are than the ones up above. Can you see that? You'll see it when you do it on your samples. Now before we go any further, I forgot one thing. When you stitch out these samples, write beside them what the settings were, right? So this one, my IQ was set at, and I've forgotten, I know it was 1. Speed was setting at 1, wasn't it? I forget now. Let's go Sew Quilt and set up the next one. Undo. Right. Okay. Just so I can see where I had it set. Just getting ready to do the third one. Alright, my IQ is set at 1.1. The details was at 0.9, so I'm writing that down. And my dial, I don't have any numbers on my dial, so I have to do a little illustration. And it was dot, and it was at 10 when I did this first one. So that's when my little notch was on my dial. For this second one, it was 1.1 on my IQ, 0.9 on my IQ, and my dial was at, right, that's 10. It was here on my machine. Okay, so this next one, I'm going to speed up my machine again. I'm going to make the needle go faster. I'm going to go way past where I get the vibration to there, and we'll set it going again. Now you could see the needle was going a lot faster, and those stitches are really tiny. So again, I'm going to write 1.1, 0.9, and I'm going to do that little drawing of my dial.
Show them again.
Okay. Show
the stitches.
The stitches? Okay. They're so tiny.
Okay.
Alright. The dial is set, okay, 1 past that where I get that vibration. So it's 1, 2 past. It's down here. That's where my dial was set. Right. Now, that's really, really tiny stitches. Very tiny stitches. So I know I would never run my needle that fast with IQ set at such a slow speed. So this time, let's do one more with the IQ set at this, and I'll go to that place where I do get that vibration on my machine, and you'll see what it's like. So we'll go, I'll just move this again, okay? We'll go sew quilt again. I'm going to go undo to get rid of this one that we've just stitched. I'm going to go touch the fourth one, swap the start end point, continue, sew quilt.
You didn't set it. Oh.
I did, yeah. And I'm going to, let's pull this up. Just one, there we go. This one, there we go. I'm going to set my dial to that one place where I get the vibration, and you will see what a horrible result I get. Okay. You can kind of see my machine bouncing a bit. Now on a straight line that doesn't make too much difference, but if that pattern had a lot of curves and stuff, that vibration of my machine would make wiggles and would not make a nice stitch out. Let's cut the thread, and then you can look at this and see how those stitches are a little bit longer. It's a bit hard to see.
Do it again.
Do this again.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you see the difference? Yeah. That's actually a nice stitch length. Unfortunately, that seems to be the case when my machine vibrates. Is where I want to set. We'll set my needle going. But anyway, we'll go 1.1, 0.9, and show my dial again. And it is that one after the 10. It was here. Okay. Okay, so now this time I'm going to set my dial on my machine to keep the needle speed the same, but I'll change the speeds on IQ so you can see the difference. Right, so we'll just go like that on my machine. Okay. So, sew quilt, undo. This is the next one. Swap the start end point. Continue. Sew quilt. IQ will go to my next line. Pull up the bobbin thread. Alright, so I'm not going to touch the controls on my machine now. I'm going to touch the controls up here. So I'm going to increase the speed setting just by tapping this. I don't know if you noticed that, but when I tap this up here, this stitch regulation sign appeared. That will disappear in a minute. I'm going to put this up to 1.5. To get rid of that stitch regulation required, I need to increase my details. So I'll go up, up, up. 1.2, details 1.5. Alright, let's see how my stitch length looks now. Start. Alright. So now this set of lines will have my machine set at 1 speed, so I'll draw that. This is 10. And where's my dial? Just about here. Okay, and my machine was set at, and I will go back to sew quilt, undo, set this up, swap, continue, sew quilt. For that previous row, the speed was 1.5. the details was 1.2. Okay, and that gave me those stitches. I don't know, did we look, see how they're kind of long? A bit longer than I would normally do on a regular quilt. Okay? Okay, so we'll start this next one. Now this time, again, I'm not touching my machine, I'm going to touch my IQ. So I'm going to speed this up. Let's go 1.8, I need to speed this up. 1.4, and we'll start. Okay. Now those are almost the same as the others. They're still really, really long, almost as the same size as the previous row. So let's go again. We'll go sew quilt. I'll undo that row we've just stitched. I'll do this one, swap the start end point, continue. We'll have IQ move to the start of the next line. And we'll speed up the settings on IQ. Let's speed that up right up to 2 and 1.8. Let's go faster. Let's go 2.3 and we'll go 2. Okay? This is the same, didn't touch my machine, I'm only touching the IQ. So I'm, okay, start. Really big stitches, can you see that? Really big stitches.
Yeah.
Alright? So my machine, IQ's moving my machine faster, so I'm getting longer stitches. So in order to get shorter stitches, I need to slow down the speed settings on IQ. So we'll go sew quilt again, undo, select the next one to stitch, swap the start end point, continue, sew quilt, and I'm going to slow down IQ this time. So we'll slow it way down to, what was the first one we did, 1.5. Oh, I forgot to write down my settings. Oh, bad. Alright, let's do this. It's a good idea to write down your settings. Then you've got something to refer to when you come back. So this was, I remember this was 2. 1.8, I think. I can't remember now. Okay, let's write this down before I forget. So this is going to be speed 1 and details 0.8. And my dial setting is the same. I haven't changed that, so we'll go start. Okay, again we'll cut that off. Now the stitches are shorter. That's kind of nice, I like that. Alright, so you get the idea. Stitch out series of lines. The first set, leave IQ set at one, leave the IQ settings alone and alter the speed on your machine. For the second set, leave the speed on your machine the same and alter the settings on IQ. And write down what the settings were on your piece of fabric. So then in the future, you can remember, you've got a reference at least. You can say, okay, I want this stitch length. Okay, I know I need to have my machine set at 1.1, 0.9 with my machine, my IQ set at 1.1, 0.9, and my IQ, my machine set at that setting. Now, in a lot of machines, you'll have numbers that you can write down for that speed. It's just IntelliStitch doesn't have any numbers. I have to do the little drawing. But this is a really good reference then for you to keep. You know, and having the 10-inch lines means you can put a ruler against it and you can actually count how many stitches if that's important to you. I usually just go and look. But that's a useful reference to know how to get the stitch length you require. Okay, I hope that made sense.